so many of us in the developed world, the seasons are defined by temperature, the freshness of spring, the heat of summer, the chill of autumn, and the cold of winter. But for billions of people on our planet that live in the tropics, the seasons are marked by the presence and absence of rain. The annual coming of the rains after months of drought, with the renewal of life from the giving water, and then, after months of rain and cloud, the sun reborn into blue skies as the next dry season begins. This is the domain of the tropical wet and dry climates. This is the tropical monsoon and the tropical savannah. In the last episode, we looked at the tropical rainforest climate zone, where rain occurs throughout the year. But most of the lands of the tropics experience some kind of drought or reduction in rainfall during the year. The severity of this drought and the total amount of rain that falls in a year determines whether it comes under the classification of monsoon or savanna. Monsoon areas are overall wetter or have a shorter drier season, while savannas are drier overall or have a longer drier season. So what accounts for this variation in rain? In the tropics, the sun will be directly above you at noon at some point in the year. And if the sun is directly above, it means it's heating that part of the earth more than any other. And that means rising air, the pulling in of moist air from the surrounding seas and oceans, and lots of rain. The band of the earth where these winds come together has for centuries been called the doldrums by sailors, because there is very little wind at this confluence and could lead to weeks or even months of being stranded in a sailing ship. The rains follow this band as it tracks the sun above and below the equator throughout the year. In July, it's summer in the north, so this band is located to the north of the equator, while in January, it is at its furthest extent south of the equator. The winds which come into this convergence are called the trade winds, named by those same sailors of centuries past, since they were so predictable, sailing ships could count on them to ply their trade. In the tropical wet and dry climate zones, these winds switch direction throughout the year, depending upon whether the doldrums are to the north or south. When they originate from the ocean, they bring in moisture and rain, but when they come from the land, they are bone dry and bring nothing. So what kind of landscapes do we find in these regions? Depending on the severity or longevity of the dry season, we can find anything from tropical forests to open grasslands. On the wetter side of this spectrum, we find much of the jungle of the Amazon and Southeast Asia, but such forests do not have as rich a biodiversity as the tropical rainforest. As the rainfall reduces the further out we go, we find less dense, drier forests until finally we have open grassland, the savanna itself. The tropical grasslands of Africa are perhaps some of the most iconic landscapes in the world. Here, the biodiversity of the tropical rainforest is exchanged for huge numbers of large herbivorous animals that trek for hundreds of miles each year to follow the rains and the green grass that feeds their vast numbers. And they themselves are followed by world-famous predator species, who don't want to let all that walking food go to waste. Much of Southeast Asia and India is given over to the production of rice, which excels in this climate, producing 2 or more harvests each year. Such productivity is one reason why Asian nations have such large populations compared to other parts of the world. In Central America, the Caribbean and Brazil, sugarcane is the most famous of world crops that has dominated these areas for centuries, while in West Africa we find much of the land given over to cocoa production. So one could say that we are thankful for the savanna climate for that most favourite of foods, chocolate. So where in the world do we find the tropical wet and dry seasons? In the tropics, obviously, that is, between 23 degrees north and south of the equator. Starting in the Americas, this zone encompasses the southern tip of Florida, much of southern Mexico, and most of Central America and the Caribbean. Large tracts of Venezuela, Brazil, and lowland Bolivia are given over to the savanna and tropical forest, and this climate zone accounts for almost half of all land area in South America, such as its extent. In Africa, we find practically all of the West and Central African nations under the savanna, along with Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar in the southeast. In Asia, most of southern India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka is in this climate zone. The famous monsoon western coast of India experiences the most extreme wet and dry seasonal variation in the world, as you'll see in the upcoming city graphs. All of Burma, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia live within these zones, along with most of Vietnam and the Philippines. Lastly, the northern coasts of Australia experience the monsoon at the opposite time of the year to its more famous Indian brother. So we talked about all those billions of people living in this climate zone. Well, most of these live in developing countries, and yet we find enormous cities here. Some of these are world famous. Here are the biggest and brightest. Well, that's it for this climate zone. I hope you found it enjoyable as well as enlightening. As usual, I would love to hear your comments, especially if you live or have lived in the tropical, monsoon, or savanna areas. Please click the like button, share the video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get updates on when the next videos release. I'll see you in the next video in a couple of weeks. Until then, stay cool.